Republicans are seeking to impeach Mayorkas. The word we heard, and I'll ask Representative Harriet Hageman this question, that there's a threat that Biden will pick somebody even worse. You say, if that's possible, oh, yeah, it's possible. Here he is, play cut 7.
Some have accused DHS of not enforcing our nation's laws. This could not be further from the truth. Having begun my public service career as a federal prosecutor for 12 years, ultimately serving as the United States Attorney, there is nothing I take more seriously than our responsibility to uphold the law. And the men and women of DHS are working around the clock to do so.
Well, let's see. 6 to 7 million people have broken that law, and you're not enforcing the law on them. I'd say you're not doing your job. Joining me on the program is Representative Harriet Hageman from Wyoming. How you doing? Welcome back.
I'm wonderful, Andrew. Happy New Year.
You too. So we played the clip of your colleague. I say that sarcastically. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez say the way you deal with the undocumented is to document them. We read quotes earlier of Secretary Mayorkas saying that we need comprehensive immigration reform. That's like saying we're just not going to enforce the law. We would never say if 20 million people said, we're not paying our taxes, they wouldn't go, okay, you have tax amnesty. You don't have to pay the federal government.
No, that's exactly right. This is absurd, but we all knew that this was the end game from the very beginning, that this was an effort to just overwhelm the system to the point where we would have to do mass amnesty, which is now what they're pushing for. So it doesn't surprise me that they're doing this, but the idea that Mayorkas is actually enforcing the law or complying with the law is an absurdity. It's absurd on its face. He knows it. It's why he's been lying under oath. I do believe he will be and should be impeached. As far as the threat that it may be worse, if we could get somebody worse, my response is I don't think there could be anybody worse unless Joe Biden appointed himself to be both the border czar as well as the president or the head of HHS, Department of Homeland Security.
He could put Neera Tanden in there. He could put Neera Tanden in there. I mean, we could find people that are obviously worse. This is what I don't understand. I was saying this earlier, and you are one of the intellectuals I can discuss this with. What does it say in a nation, in a society, in a constitutional republic, where the powers of the central authority are turning ever more inward? Right? Matthew Graves, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, has said they're going to round up thousands more people who were not even in the Capitol on January 6th. We're now looking at handing down a punishment to Donald Trump for a crime he's not even accused of. The only criminal statute that bars people from office is the Rebellion and Insurrection Act. Nobody's been charged under that, but we're now handing down a punishment for a crime that he's not even accused of, completely in violation of the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, guaranteeing due process. There's new due process here. But conversely, what we're being told is as millions of people stream across the border illegally, the way to deal with them is to give them exactly what it is they were seeking by committing the crime of violating our sovereignty.
Well, there's a couple of things that I would say about this, and the way that I refer to it is I think most people think of anarchy as coming from the bottom. We're actually living through a circumstance where the anarchy is coming from the top. The very top leaders of our country are the ones that are thumbing their nose at the law and ignoring it. They're ignoring not only the due process aspect of the Fifth Amendment, but they're ignoring the equal protection clauses, which is what you're describing. So what we have is we have a government that's going to pick and choose which laws they're going to enforce. And what we've always said is one of the things that has set America apart is we are a government of laws, not of men. And we now see that our forefathers, when they warned us that our Constitution would only work for a moral and just people, they were absolutely correct. We just happen to be led by people who are neither moral nor just at this point. They have realized that they can weaponize the government against us. They can weaponize the Department of Justice and the FBI and other three-letter agencies, and all we can do is scream into the wind that this isn't fair, this isn't right, this violates the Constitution, and they look at us and say, "Why? We don't care that it does. It doesn't matter that it does. What are you going to do? Get a judge in Washington, D.C. to rule in your favor?" And my answer to that is eventually, yes, we will. We will get this righted. We will get this straightened out. In the meantime, we're all going to suffer for the anarchy that is coming from the White House and the top Democrats.
I would love, I said it earlier, I would love to sit with Sotomayor, Jackson, and Kagan and say, look, I get it. You guys probably don't like Donald Trump on any level. And, and I understand what the TV legal analysts are doing on various television programs. But is the Supreme Court really prepared to allow the administration, or should I say state officials, some of whom aren't even elected, to just ignore the Fifth Amendment? That you cannot
They're
be
not. They're not willing to do that, but it's also why the constant drumbeat against the Supreme Court has been to basically disenfranchise and delegitimize it. These people know, whether it's the Adam Schiffs of the world or that crazy other guy that's always talking about how he wants to impose ethical rules against the Supreme Court, the guy, there's a couple people in the House and the Senate, Cohen, I think, is one of them. These people, they know that the Supreme Court is doing exactly what they should. They know that they're following the law, but they're attempting to delegitimize them so that any time there is a decision that they can disagree with, they can say, we're not going to follow that decision because we disagree with it and the court isn't legitimate. So this really is an attack on our institutions, and that's why I say it is a form of anarchy that's coming from the top. They're not just undermining our laws by going out and burning police cars and things like that, although during the course of the 2020 Summer of Love, that's exactly what they were doing. They now are torching our institutions. Metaphorically, as well as I think what you're going to see this year is you're going to see violence on behalf of the Democrats to try to stop the election from even going forward. Does that sound crazy? Would I have said that 2 years ago? Probably not. But it is exactly what you're saying. They don't care what the law is. They don't care what due process means. They don't care what equal protection requires. It is a means to an end, and we are in that point in our history right now where they will do whatever is necessary to control the levers of power.
I will give this is what I've been saying, and I don't do conspiracy theory because I don't need to, okay? If we are prepared to hand down sentences, right, criminal punishments, in the Rebellion and Insurrection Act, there's a jail term and the barring of office for life. Donald Trump is not charged with that. That would be like saying, well, we're charging you with tax evasion, but we're going to hand you down the sentence for murder. But, I didn't commit a murder. No, we're saying you're a murderer.
That's right.
Right? They're saying this is a January 6th trial. He's an insurrectionist, except he's not charged. He's charged with 18 U.S.C. 1512 and 294, neither of which carry the penalty of being barred from office. Seditious conspiracy doesn't carry it. Advocacy for overthrow of the government doesn't carry it. Only rebellion and insurrection carries that penalty. Nobody's been charged with that. It is frightening to think that we're going to look as the Maine Secretary of State or the Colorado State Supreme Court or any of these other venues that are far from this alleged incident, now just handing down a criminal penalty where the person has not even faced the charge in court. And I compared this earlier to internment. The Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued an executive order that said Americans of Japanese descent no longer retain their citizenship or their Fifth Amendment rights and were rounded up by the U.S. Army and incarcerated without being charged. And nobody was there to stop it.
Well, and I would agree with you, but again, what I come back to is neither the Colorado Supreme Court nor the Secretary of State in Maine actually intend their orders to be carried out to block President Trump from being on the ballot. Again, the point of it was to make the point. It was to say, to brand this person as being disqualified from holding office, from being delegitimate. So in the event that Donald Trump is our president, what are we going to hear for 4 solid years? He's an insurrectionist. He's illegitimate. We don't have to listen to what he says. We don't have to follow his laws. We don't have to carry out his orders. All of this is part and parcel of the same tactics that they have been using now for the last couple of decades, and that is to destroy anything that they disagree with. If they can't get it through the courts, if they can't ram it through regulations, if they can't do it that way, then they're going to undermine our laws and our Constitution in and of itself. If you look at page 9 of the Colorado Supreme Court decision, they specifically state that should this decision be appealed, his name, President Trump's name, will appear on the ballot. In other words, they knew from the very beginning that their decision would never be carried forward, that he would never be barred from the ballot. But this is a political decision. It is not a legal decision. This is an effort to undermine the very foundation of our country and our institutions.
Now, let me bring that back to the border. We have people who are clearly violating federal law. They are clearly violating immigration law. We have laws on the books. Deportation is the penalty, and none of these people are being repatriated to their home country. They are not people adrift. They're not from unincorporated Antarctica or the whatever. They are foreign nationals who have entered our country illegally. We magically have all of the resources to move them from the border to the interior, to put them up in housing, but not the resources to bring them back to their home country.
I was at the border last Wednesday. We were in Eagle Pass. And over the previous several days, there had been thousands of people, illegals, processed through that particular facility. The day we were there, we saw maybe 100, 150 people, maybe 65 in one group, another 35 young men in another group that were kind of cordoned off. They were the ones who had some kind of a sickness or some kind of a medical condition that was being addressed. I would say 80% or 90% of them were young men of military age. Very few of them were from Mexico. You could tell they were from Africa, they were from the Middle East, they were from South America, they were not from Mexico, so they are coming here from all over the world, and they're being brought into our country. One of the things that struck me is that when they found out, when the powers that be here in D.C. and the Border Patrol and Mayorkas found out that a group of congressional representatives were going to the border last Wednesday, they were able to stop the flow of illegals coming into Eagle Pass, Texas. What does that tell me? That they have contact with the cartels, because it's the cartels that know when to send people over. They have contact with the cartels, and they're able to turn this off and on as they see fit. That's one thing that I think people need to understand. It was very clear that they had cleaned up the entire area. They had raked the lawn. They had tried to make it clean. They were using spray bottles to cover up the smell, doing all kinds of things so that they would not have the kind of worried about when we went down there. But the other thing that struck me was we're really, really, really good at bureaucratic processing. There were people everywhere with state-of-the-art computer systems and their documents and their forms lined up and boxes of large T-shirts and extra-large T-shirts and extra-large boxers and crew socks and tennis shoes and young girl tennis shoes and older girl tennis shoes and all of these things. We're fabulous at processing. We're fabulous at bureaucratic processing, and we're processing our own demise. It struck me that nobody seemed to think, why in the world are we processing thousands of people through here who we know do not meet the requirements for claiming asylum, and yet we are processing them through here by the tens of thousands every single week, and we are sending them to the interior of our country to destroy our cities, to take over our schools. We have people, they don't speak English, they don't understand our culture, they're never going to assimilate, and everybody's saying, well, but we filled out the right forms, we got the right signature, we filled out the right forms, we took their temperature, we filled out the right forms, we got them the right size T-shirt, we got them the right size set of tennis shoes. That's what we're doing. I am standing there watching this, and I'm thinking, I'm in some kind of a bizarre dystopian movie where nobody is realizing we are processing the very demise of our foundation of our republic, and nobody seems to care just so long as the right form has been filled out.
Well, just to back up what you're saying, we had Yakub Boyens on earlier. He runs Yakub Boyens Ministries. They are an anti-trafficking organization. And everything you just said about them cleaning up the scene, knowing you were coming, is what he said when he was there to meet some of the members of Congress that were there. He said just literally a couple hours ago, earlier in the program, or an hour and a half ago, excuse me, he said that they magically put up some fencing and they put up some barbed wire and they cleaned up the place, and anything that was considered an eyesore for the photo op, for a photo op, was removed, cleaned, gotten out of the way. So that's now two people in the same radio program have told me the same story.
Oh, yeah, it's a very nice facility. It's a beautiful facility that we're spending over $1 million a day just operating. And you know what else they told us? Just in that one sector, in the Eagles Pass sector alone, the cartels are making $32 million a week. Do the math. It's $1.6 billion a year just for one sector in terms of the amount of human trafficking that is going through that sector. You look at these young women. You look at these young men. You look at what they are. They're wrapped them in their tinfoil blankets. And as I said, they're processing them through with their T-shirts and their crew socks and their underwear and their sweatshirts and their sweatpants, and they're showering them down. And boy, they do it really, really well. And they know which form to fill out, and they know how to sign it, and they put their X on the bottom, and then they shove them right out the back door, and they go onto a bus, and they get trafficked to Chicago or Los Angeles or Billings, Montana, or Wyoming, or wherever it is. We have bureaucrats that are bringing tens of thousands of people into this country every week and not even thinking about, you know what, is this really a good idea? All they care about is that they got the forms filled out right and they got the right size T-shirts.
And one thing, I got to wrap up here. Well, we've talked about this before. Representative Harriet Hageman is joining us at large, Wyoming, that you have 500,000 people in the great territory of Wyoming. It would not take a whole lot of building what we've called a pod city, right? You put some public,
That's right.
You create some, housing for the migrants. What sounds temporary will eventually take on a sense of permanence, as people are going to have to move around to become teachers and healthcare workers, and they're going to have to shop somewhere, and they're going to have to live somewhere. So you're going to need them. And next thing you know, you move 100, 200,000 people into a state like Wyoming, and then the people that flow into work at those federal facilities. And man, you flip the state of Wyoming, and there'll never be another Republican president again if this happens in a handful of states. And they know it.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right, and they absolutely know it. And I grew up outside of a little tiny town. My high school had 125 kids in 4 grades. I graduated with 30-some kids in my class. Can you imagine what it's going to do to our little tiny schools if you bring in 5 illegals that don't speak English? And that we're going to have to provide an education for them. It's one thing to do it in New York, and Mayor Adams has said that it cost them $35,000 per student, and they had 20,000 illegals enroll in their schools in August. That is, again, $1 billion. That has a $1 billion price tag just as of August 2023. Look what it can do to Wyoming as well. We are taking the resources that we have, our tax money, and we are diverting those resources to things that we should not be spending money on at the same time that our own infrastructure is crumbling. We've got kids in Philadelphia that cannot read, cannot write, cannot do mathematics, and we're deflecting all of these resources in a way that we shouldn't. Again, I'm going to say it. This is anarchy from the top, and we have to stop this nonsense, and we start with Mayorkas.
Yeah. Yeah, well, look, I guess we can argue whether or not we can get somebody who's worse. I think it's entirely possible. But on one side, we have a man who is a former president who may be doled a sentence for a crime he's not even accused of, while millions of people cross the border illegally and stay in hotel rooms here in New York City. I got to leave it there. Well, look, we always love having you on the program. Look forward to getting you back on the Salem News Channel.
Thanks, Andrew. See you soon.
See you soon.